Evelyn Rhodes. A 72-year-old black woman was fatally shot by police right outside her home. No weapon, no threat, just a trash bag in her hand. But what the officers didn't know was who her son was. Malik Rhodes, a Delta Force legend, arrived just seconds later, too late to save her, but right on time to make the entire system tremble. He didn't scream. He didn't protest. He moved in silence with a mission. What does a soldier do when the battlefield is his mother's front lawn? If this hits you deep like the video, share it. And now let me tell you what really happened that day. Every block has a soul, and on West Maple Lane it wore house shoes and a denim apron. Evelyn Rhodes didn't make noise. She didn't march, didn't protest. But she was the kind of woman who could walk past a group of young men cussing on a porch and have them go silent out of respect. 72 years old. Widow, mother of one, and a retired Army nurse. She had seen life in war zones but still believed the battle for dignity was hardest fought right here on the cracked sidewalks of a forgotten street. She lived alone. Same red brick home she and her late husband bought in 1978. Same old gate. Same creaky screen door. Same porch where years ago her son Malik once cried over a scraped knee and she kissed it like it mattered more than any war wound she'd ever treated. But West Maple Lane wasn't the same. The streetlights flickered. 911 calls took longer. Strangers in uniform lingered longer at the corner than they used to. A quiet system had already decided people like Evelyn didn't matter. It had a name, CPS Community Incident Prioritization System. And it stamped Evelyn as low-priority black senior, meaning your calls don't ring as loud, your complaints get flagged for non-urgent review, and when something happens to you, they take their time. But Evelyn. She still sent letters, typed slowly on her dusty keyboard, the R key a little stuck. She signed each one, with respect, E. Rhodes. And she sent them to people who'd long stopped caring. Still, she wrote, "This street has potholes deep enough to swallow a child. There are unmarked cruisers idling outside Jefferson Liquor for hours. Why is my neighbor's grandson being stopped 3 times a week just walking home?" She knew they weren't listening. But maybe if she kept writing, someone would. Sometimes that someone was Jada. Jada lived 2 houses down, age 10, full of questions and courage. She started recording vlogs on her mama's cracked iPhone. Every week she'd sit next to Evelyn on the steps and ask Miss Evelyn what's wrong with the world this time. And Evelyn, with her voice soft but sharp as gospel, would say, "People stopped seeing each other. Now they only scan, sort, and forget." Jada would blink, then whisper into the camera, "That's truth with Miss Evelyn." Only a few people watched, but those who did felt it. She wasn't just a woman on a porch. She was the neighborhood's whispering conscience, the last steady flame in a place growing colder by the week. But even flames go out. And that morning, the one no one forgets, felt wrong from the start. The air was heavy, like it had swallowed a scream. Some kids played, but not loud. Even the birds seemed to hush. Evelyn stepped out around 9:13 a.m., a plastic trash bag in one hand, her other hand tucked inside her sweater pocket. She walked slow like always. Her hips ached more these days, but her eyes were alert, sharp. She noticed the unmarked car turning onto the street. 2 officers inside, young, jittery. She paused just a beat and whispered to herself, "They're driving too fast again." She bent down to tie the bag. Behind her, one of the officers muttered, "Possible suspect. Black female. Standing holding something. It wasn't a weapon. It was a trash bag. But systems don't read dignity. They read data. And SIPs had marked this location cold. Low risk, no priority." The officer stepped out. Hand on holster. "Ma'am, drop it." His voice cracked not with command but panic. Evelyn turned slowly, held the trash bag out to the side, eyes steady, calm. "Son, this is my home." For a second the world paused. Then the rookie flinched. One shot. Jada screamed from her window. Neighbors ducked. The officer's partner yelled, "What the hell did you just do?" Evelyn crumpled like wind through curtains. At that very moment, just across the street, a black SUV turned the corner. It slowed, parked. The door opened. Boots touched pavement, and out stepped Malik Rhodes. But we'll get to him soon. For now, all you need to know is this: Evelyn never raised her voice, never broke a law, never carried a weapon. But in the eyes of a system designed to erase people quietly, she was dangerous. Because she still believed the truth mattered. And on that street, her street, she had never stopped fighting for it. The last time folks on West Maple Lane saw Malik Rhodes, he was 27, broad-shouldered, quiet as a held breath, with a military stance that told you not to ask questions. And just like that, he disappeared. No postcards, no calls, not even a rumor. He became what the neighborhood called the ghost who made it out. But in truth, Malik never left. Not really. He'd been pulled into the shadows of America's secret wars, serving in a covert network buried deep inside U.S. Defense Intelligence. His file wasn't redacted, it was erased. His name wasn't whispered, it was forgotten on purpose. He was 40 now, stationed somewhere on the West Coast. He moved like a man still watching every doorway, still counting every second. Until 3 weeks ago when the silence shifted. It started subtle. He texted Evelyn, no answer. He waited 2 days, called, no pickup. He sent a secure voice ping, one only she could receive. Nothing came back. Maybe it was her phone, he thought. She'd always hated upgrades. Last Christmas she told him, "Malik, I don't need a phone smarter than me. I just need one that rings." But by the 4th week, instinct kicked in. That old gut feeling from war zones where things went quiet right before a bomb. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He unlocked a secure backup system, the surveillance feed he'd quietly installed in her attic. Not to spy, to protect. It had been his way of staying close without making her feel watched. She never even knew it existed. But this time, when he opened the feed, it was dead. Black screen. No timestamp, no data. Just a message, connection lost. He blinked, reopened from a different port. Still dead. Something cold passed through him. He stood up, zipped one duffel bag, and left the safe house. He took only what mattered. One change of clothes, one encrypted ID, his sidearm, and the last voicemail she ever left him. On the red-eye flight to New York, he sat in silence, staring into the dark sky. The words played in his mind like a lullaby he couldn't forget. You don't need to shout to change the world, Malik. Just don't stop walking. When the wheels hit JFK tarmac, it was 4:12 a.m., that in-between hour. Not night, not morning. The hour cities mourn in silence. He didn't call a cab, didn't call anyone. He walked, hood up, eyes low. Block by block, he passed buildings that still had the same rusted mailboxes and broken street lamps. Only now, they looked older, more tired, like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath. Then he saw it. The house. But something was wrong. 2 squad cars sat idle at the curb. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just silence. And yellow tape. Tangled, fluttering in the wind like it had already given up trying to hold people back. His mother's trash bin was still out front. Top knocked off. A few torn envelopes scattered near the curb. One of them had her name. Still legible, Evelyn Rhodes. Malik stepped past the tape. He didn't flinch. A young officer saw him. "Sir, this is a restricted scene." Malik didn't blink. "Sir," I said. The second officer, older, pale, went silent mid-sentence. "Is that?" Malik dropped to one knee. Right there, in the chalk outline, in the dried red stain. He reached out slowly and pressed 2 fingers to the pavement. It was dry, cracked, but still held the shape of something human. His fingers trembled, not from fear, from memory. This was where she fell. Alone. Discarded like her voice never mattered. His jaw clenched. He didn't cry, didn't speak. But something in the air around him shifted. The officers didn't say another word. Because somehow, without knowing who he was, they knew. He wasn't just some grieving man from out of town. He was the reckoning. A presence that didn't need to shout to bring silence, didn't need to explain to be obeyed. And though he said nothing, every inch of his body screamed one thing loud and clear: "You touched the wrong woman." He stood slowly, looked down the street like he was mapping a battlefield, because to him, this wasn't a crime scene. It was a war zone. And the ghost, the one the neighborhood forgot, he just came home. They say you never forget the sound of a gunshot on your own street. That morning, no one did. Officer Travis Boone, 27, was still new to the force, white, eager, too proud of his badge and too scared to admit how little he understood this neighborhood. He had just gotten the call, "Possible suspect fleeing through the alley behind Maple and 136th. No description, no weapon reported, just static, followed by use caution." So he did what they taught him at the academy, ran fast, scanned corners, pointed his gun first, asked questions second. He charged through back fences like a soldier chasing a shadow, but there was no suspect, just trash bins, morning dew, and silence. And then movement, far end of the yard. A figure in a long gray robe, tall, hooded, moving slowly near a garbage can. He didn't stop to think, didn't wait for backup. "Freeze!" he shouted, gun raised. The figure turned, startled, hands up trembling. It was Evelyn Rhodes. She wore her soft housecoat gray with white trim, the one she always wore for chilly mornings. Her silver hair poked out from the hood. She held a tied trash bag in one hand, the other lifted open-palmed. But Boone's breath was shallow. His heart raced. His training screamed, "Control the threat. I said freeze." On the ground, Evelyn didn't run, didn't argue. She just stepped back. One slow step, and that was all it took. Bang! The shot cracked the air like a snapped bone. Time stopped. The trash bag dropped. Her knees buckled. She slumped to the pavement like someone had flipped a switch, and her blood, thick and deep, spread across the concrete like ink spilling from a broken pen. Boone didn't move, didn't holster his weapon. His eyes were wide, lips parted, as if even he didn't believe what he'd done. From a balcony above, a woman screamed, then silence. Then a child's voice, trembling but clear. Why'd he shoot her? It was Jada. Tiny, curious Jada, the neighbor's 10-year-old daughter who always filmed Miss Evelyn's mornings on her tablet. She was already recording when it happened. The whole thing. Uncut, unfiltered. From Boone's shout to the trigger pull to Evelyn's final breath. She didn't get to speak, didn't get her last words. She just faded. Inside the precinct later, Boone would write, "Suspect did not comply. Believed to be armed. Threat perceived as immediate. But there was no weapon. No threat. No chase. Just an old woman trying to take out her trash before her tea boiled." The neighborhood heard the shot. Most stayed behind closed doors. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Because where they lived, noise like that wasn't new. What was new was silence afterward. Heavy. Unsettling. This wasn't just another siren. This was Evelyn. She was the one who'd fought the city for streetlights. The one who watched every kid walk home from school. The one who left granola bars in the hallway for the mailman when it snowed. And now, she was gone. The officers roped off the yard. Boone was escorted away. Paramedics came too late, too quietly, but Jada stayed. She clutched the tablet to her chest, eyes full of something no child should carry. She didn't cry. She just whispered to no one in particular. She was just standing there. She didn't even move fast. Later that day, someone would try to delete the footage. A precinct tech acting on a glitch report. But the video had already auto-synced to the cloud, to Jada's backup, to her mother's email, to 3 of Evelyn's old friends she used to call her backbone ladies. That clip. It wouldn't stay silent. But right now, all anyone could feel was absence. The kind that echoes. And that's how it began. Not with riots, not with protests, but with a shot aimed at no one, and hitting someone who mattered more than they ever realized. The taxi hadn't even pulled away when Malik Rhodes stepped out into the morning chill. He hadn't brought much, just a black duffel slung over one shoulder, and a gut feeling that had kept him awake for days. But he never got the chance to grab that bag. Pop. The sound was unmistakable. A gunshot close, sharp, echoing off brick walls and quiet porches. Malik didn't flinch. He dropped the duffel and sprinted across the street, boots hitting pavement like thunder. By the time he reached the front gate of his childhood home, everything was already too still. The yard was cordoned off in yellow tape. 2 officers stood by the body. One of them, pale and trembling, still held his weapon low but not holstered. And there she was. His mother. Evelyn Rhodes. Face tilted slightly, eyes half open. A dark bloom of blood spread beneath her robe, seeping into the cracks of the concrete like it was trying to hide. Malik froze. Just for a second. Then he stepped forward. One of the officers, a younger one with a stiff jaw, began to lift his weapon again, as if by instinct. But when Malik looked up, just looked at him, the officer stopped. Mid-motion. Eyes wide, frozen. Because there was something in Malik's face that made everything else go still. Not rage, not panic, just focus. A deadly cold kind of silence. Malik didn't say a word. He crossed the yard, kneeled beside her. His hands, usually steady with rifles and battlefield dressings, shook slightly as he brushed her cheek. Still warm, still there, barely. He leaned in close and whispered, "I told you I'd keep you safe, Ma." And for a second, just one, the mask cracked. The man they once called Spectre 9 blinked back a wave of something too human. Then it vanished. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small encrypted device no civilian would ever recognize, and pressed 3 quick codes. Spectre 9. Code Black. Civilian down. He said nothing aloud. Didn't need to. That signal alone would ripple straight through layers of federal intelligence infrastructure and alert people far above city jurisdiction. One of the officers stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, please step back. This isn't active." But he didn't finish, because Malik turned his head. Not fast, not aggressive, just turned. And the look in his eyes said everything. The officer stepped back. 2 steps, then 3. The neighbors were watching now, behind windows, through phone screens, from balconies. Jada stood beside her mother, still gripping her tablet. Her mom tried to shield her eyes, but Jada didn't blink. Because this man, whoever he was, he wasn't screaming. He wasn't breaking down. He was still. Too still. He pulled Evelyn's body closer, cradling her like a soldier holding the flag-draped remains of a fallen comrade. But this wasn't combat. This was home. And Malik, this towering, silent figure, didn't shed a tear. That silence spread. Like a wave. The entire block, no sirens now. No yelling. No scuffle was swallowed in it. Even Boone the shooter stood there. Weapon limp in his hand. Looking at Malik like he was seeing a ghost step out of war and into his worst mistake. Nobody dared move. Not even the wind. Malik stayed there on his knees, holding her. Minutes passed. Long ones. He didn't speak again. Didn't look at anyone. Because right then, the entire world had narrowed to this, the woman who raised him. The porch they built with their hands. And the fact that he was 5 seconds too late. Back inside the quiet of his childhood home, Malik sat at his mother's kitchen table, where the scent of old coffee grounds still lingered. The chipped mug with faded sunflowers she always used sat in the drying rack. The cushion on her chair, hand-stitched with navy thread, still held the impression of where she used to sit. But she would never sit there again. Malik didn't cry. He didn't tremble. He just sat perfectly still, his back straight, his hands folded. What moved wasn't his face. It was the air. The kind of air that thickens when you realize the world just erased someone you loved. He reached into his bag and pulled out a matte black laptop booting into a secure interface not listed on any government registry. No username, just biometric scan and 3 silent pulses. The screen flickered to life. He wasn't here to look for sympathy. He was looking for the shadow behind the bullet. CIPS, Civilian Impact Prioritization System. He'd helped write parts of its early defense protocols back before he knew what it would become. Now he was going to rip it apart. He typed slowly, Evelyn Rhodes. The screen blinked, then responded with 2 cold words, unresponsive, low impact. Malik's jaw tensed. He opened the deeper layers of the data. 18 submissions. His mother had sent in 18 separate reports over 4 years about broken streetlights, harassment by patrols, drug activity near the playground. Each was filtered by the algorithm before any human ever saw it, flagged as low threat, elderly, non-combative, low income, non-urgent, no escalation, no follow-up, no voice. One entry in particular made his hand freeze mid-air. A letter she'd written just 2 months ago complaining about a marked patrol vehicle sitting outside her house for 3 nights straight. She wrote, I don't know if it's intimidation or neglect, but silence feels heavy when it comes from those sworn to serve. The entry was marked as automatically filtered. No human eyes ever read that. Malik closed his eyes. His mind pulled up an old memory, him barely 20, telling his mother she was wasting time writing those letters. You can't change a system built not to hear you, he'd said. And she had just smiled. Then I'll keep writing till the paper listens. Now the paper was gone, and he was the only one listening. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. She didn't die today, he whispered. She had been dying slowly, silently for years. Dying by deletion. Buried in quiet folders. Ignored by software and shrugged off by officers who never read her name out loud. Not a single press conference. Not a single public record. He opened his mother's old file folder. Inside were carbon copies of the same letters now marked irrelevant by the system. Her handwriting still elegant, still pressing gently into the paper like she believed it would leave a mark. She trusted a system I helped build, he muttered. And it erased her. With steady hands, Malik inserted a military-grade thumb drive into the laptop. Click, copying metadata logs and all 18 reports. This wasn't just about Evelyn anymore. This was about every woman like her erased while alive, silenced while standing. The system had trained itself to forget them. Malik was going to train it to remember. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed black case. Inside it, a single ID chip unlabeled. He pressed his thumb to it. A faint blue light flickered, then locked into solid glow. In Washington, in a bunker beneath layers of cyber defense, a signal pulsed into a closed relay, Spectre 9 silent response protocol. Initiated. Malik didn't raise his voice, didn't reach for a gun, didn't even stand. This wasn't about revenge. It was about correction. He whispered almost to himself, if they won't hear our voices, I'll make them feel our silence. Outside, the street was quiet, but something had shifted. The machine that labeled Evelyn Rhodes irrelevant had just met the one man trained to destroy systems from the inside. And he had just begun. The video was shaky raw and heartbreakingly clear. No dramatic cuts, no voiceovers, no music, just the trembling hand of a child holding a phone, and the truth pouring out through her lens. Jada, only 12 years old, had seen it all from her upstairs window. She had been filming one of her regular vlogs, stories with Miss Evelyn, hoping to catch one more smile, one more wise saying before bedtime. Instead, she caught something else. A voice yelling, "Freeze!" An elderly woman in a gray robe turning slowly, lifting her hands. A gunshot. And then silence. A silence that cracked through the Bronx like a falling church bell. Jada didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just hit upload. The title was simple. She was taking the trash out. That's all. In the first 15 minutes, it got a few dozen views. By midnight, it had crossed 100,000. By morning, the number had exploded into millions. The image of Evelyn collapsing in her own front yard. Her gentle face, stunned by the force of violence, burned itself into America's screens. News anchors couldn't look away. Twitter couldn't keep up. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Justice. For Evelyn. Say her name. She was taking the trash. Out some wept, some raged, but no one stayed silent. In a span of hours, her name was etched into murals flashed across late-night panels, spoken with trembling voices in community churches and on national TV. Jada's clip played again and again, each time unedited, unfiltered, undeniable. And there was one question on every tongue. Why did they shoot her? The police department issued a single sterile press release. Officers were in pursuit of a suspect matching a loose description. The incident is under active review. We extend our condolences. It wasn't enough. Not this time. Because now they had the tape. No editing room could twist it. No lawyer could spin it. And perhaps most painfully for the department, no one knew where Evelyn's son was. He hadn't shown up to speak to reporters. He hadn't posted, hadn't tweeted, hadn't gone on camera. He had simply vanished into the mist. But for those who paid close attention, little signs appeared. A major investigative journalist tweeted that her server had been hit by a non-traceable scrub hours after requesting police body cam footage. A City Hall staffer whispered to reporters that someone had broken into the archive vault but left everything exactly as it was, except for one missing case file. An NYPD lieutenant off the record said, "We're being watched," and not by the press. No one knew Malik Rhodes's name yet, but his silence was louder than 1,000 microphones, and still at the center of it all was Jada. She didn't understand why grown-ups kept calling her brave. She didn't feel brave. She felt sad and tired and old in a way no 12-year-old should ever feel. Sitting on her bed, watching her phone vibrate non-stop, she whispered, "I just didn't want them to lie about her." Miss Evelyn had been the only adult who ever listened to her without interrupting. She always said I was going to be someone, Jada told a local reporter through tears. But she was someone, and they took her away. For nothing. The world listened to that too. And yet, even as millions screamed for justice, one man said nothing. Malik. He watched the video once, just once, on a secure line in a dark room. No emotion showed on his face. But when it ended, he simply murmured, "This is no longer about a mistake." Then quietly his fingers tapped into encrypted keys. He sent a command. And somewhere a dormant program named Sovereign Echo began to wake. Not a protest, not a speech, but a precision-driven, coordinated data leak, aimed straight at the nerves of the machine that had failed Evelyn. Meanwhile, Jada's video was now on every screen in the country, and every viewer was asking the same thing. What happens now? Officer Riley sat at her desk long after her shift had ended, replaying the footage for the 5th time. She'd seen plenty in her 12 years on the force drug busts, shootouts, domestic calls gone wrong. But this was different. There was no chaos, no threat, just an old woman in slippers slowly stepping out to take the trash, and then falling to the ground, her robe soaked in red. Riley paused the video right at the moment Evelyn's hands started to lift. It was a clean freeze frame, Her palms open, her eyes calm. Not defiant, not confused, just human. And Boone. Officer Travis Boone firing anyway. She closed her laptop, jaw tight. That's when she opened his personnel file. Dozens of minor complaints, one suspension, an internal note flagged political alignment concerns quietly buried 3 years ago. But there was something else. A name. Malik Rhodes. Possible family connection to deceased. But when she clicked the link to the attached ID verification, the screen went black for a full 2 seconds. Then it flashed red, restricted access, sovereign tier, do not pursue. Riley frowned. She'd never seen that level of clearance. Not even when the FBI liaised on homeland threats. Not even during anti-terror drills. She rerouted her search through an old contact in internal military databases, just for a name check. What came back chilled her. Spectre 9. Not a code name, not a title. A designation reserved for ghost operatives embedded so deeply in national security missions, even their existence wasn't acknowledged. Malik Rhodes wasn't just a grieving son. He was a walking classified file. Minutes later, she got a call from her lieutenant. Cold voice. No pleasantries. Riley. Step off the Rhodes case. Immediately. Sir, you heard me. There will be no further digging. That's not a request. But this is bigger than you know. Let it go. Click. She stared at the deadline, and then, without hesitation, grabbed her jacket. She wasn't going home. Instead, she walked 3 blocks down to the apartment of a little girl she'd only met once, weeks ago, during a neighborhood watch meeting Evelyn Rhodes had organized. The same Evelyn whose smile she still remembered because it had made her feel seen. Jada answered the door in pajamas, eyes wide with confusion and grief. Officer Riley. Can I come in for a second? The girl nodded. They sat in silence for a few beats. Then Riley asked softly, Why did you upload the video? Jada looked up, her voice barely above a whisper, because they were gonna say she was reaching for something, or that she ran. But she didn't. She just stood there, like she always did. Riley swallowed. She wasn't loud, was she? Jada shook her head. No, but we all listened. Those 5 words settled in Riley's chest like bricks. Back at the precinct, everything was buzzing. There were whispers now. A federal inquiry possibly incoming, public pressure mounting. And inside the noise, Malik Rhodes was nowhere to be seen. But Riley understood something her colleagues didn't. He didn't need to show up to be present. His silence was coordinated, focused, measured like a man who had learned to fight without raising his voice. She made a decision. Riley accessed a locked drawer in evidence review and pulled out an older decommissioned flash drive. It wasn't connected to department servers. That was the point. She began downloading what she could, Boone's body cam logs, partially redacted. Chain of command directives during the chase. The CIPS incident flagging Evelyn as low priority, non-responsive. Then she wrote a single line on a sticky note. I believe you already know where to send this. She folded the drive in a padded envelope, tucked the note inside, and walked down the alley behind the station toward the only place in the city where mail never needed stamps and certain envelopes were never traced. Riley wasn't part of any resistance. She didn't march. She didn't shout. She just believed some things were too wrong to ignore. And maybe, just maybe, one good cop was enough to crack the first brick in a wall that had been standing too long. It wasn't just a funeral. It was a gathering the city hadn't seen in years. Over 400 people stood in a quiet field behind the old Methodist chapel on 148th Street. Men in pressed suits, mothers with strollers, veterans with medals on faded uniforms, and dozens of kids holding small handwritten signs that read, "She mattered." Most of them had never met Evelyn Rhodes, but they'd seen her face now. They'd watched the video, And something about the way she fell without fighting, without anger, had shaken them, like a truth too plain to ignore. There was no big choir, no music, just the wind pressing gently through the trees like a sigh that couldn't quite settle. Malik stood in the very back, dressed in black, no medals, no words. His hands were folded in front of him, his eyes still. He hadn't cried once, not when he held her, not when the ambulance came, not now, because tears were for grief. And Malik wasn't grieving, he was remembering. At the front, Jada stood behind the small wooden podium. The wind lifted her braids as she looked out over the sea of faces, faces waiting, hurting, hoping someone would say something that made sense. She took a breath, unfolded a piece of old lined notebook paper, and said quietly, "This was the last letter Ms. Evelyn ever wrote. She never mailed it, but she left it folded under her kitchen lamp. I think she meant it for all of us." A silence fell so thick you could hear the birds stop singing, and then Jada read, her voice steady. "To whom it may concern. I know my name isn't in your system, at least not in a way that matters. I know when I write you do not read. When I speak, your algorithms classify my tone as non-urgent. When I report, your forms redirect me into silence. But I have only one question left to ask if a person is not important enough to be answered. Then who is left worthy of living under your law, ER?" When she finished, no one clapped. No one moved. Even the media crew lowered their cameras for a moment. Something about those words sat like weight on the chest. Within hours, the footage went viral. But this time, it wasn't the video of her death people shared. It was the letter. Typed across screens in white text on black backgrounds, read aloud on radio broadcasts, printed on the front page of morning editions from coast to coast. The headline in the Washington Post read, "If she wasn't worthy, who is?" Across the city, something shifted. In cafes, people whispered her name. On buses, her letter was quoted between strangers. Churches printed her words in Sunday programs. And late-night hosts, those who rarely waded into real grief, paused their comedy to read Evelyn's final message. That week, over 50,000 letters of complaint flooded City Hall. Another 20,000 were sent to the Department of Justice. And behind the noise, one envelope quietly made its way into the hands of the Federal Oversight Committee. Inside, Boone's full body cam log. Internal memos showing how Evelyn's reports had been systematically filtered. Classified system tags labeling her as non-escalatory low relevance. And one handwritten note unsigned that simply read, "She wasn't a glitch. She was the test you failed." Riley didn't tell anyone what she had done. She didn't need to. She just watched the committee convene 2 days later. Federal investigators launched an audit of the CIPS system. Suddenly, words like systemic triage bias and discriminatory auto-prioritization began appearing on national news, and in the background, Malik moved like smoke. No cameras followed him, no reporters knew his name. But his presence lingered in strategic files missing from precinct databases, in quiet meetings between military and federal officials, in whispered reassignment notices handed out to mid-level commanders. Because Malik wasn't building a case. He was collapsing a wall brick by digital brick. And it all began with a woman in a bathrobe, a trash bag in one hand, and dignity in the other. The city had finally woken up. But it wasn't a riot that did it. It wasn't fire or fury. It was a letter. And a girl brave enough to read it. It didn't make headlines at first. There was no dramatic press conference, no applause. Just a quiet memo leaked on a Tuesday morning. Effective immediately, all operations of the CIPS program are suspended, pending federal investigation. 3 lines. That's all. But in those lines, a system cracked. Investigators flooded the departments. They opened algorithms, searched internal tags, pulled messages hidden behind layers of bureaucratic fog. And what they found wasn't a mistake. It was design. A system that learned who not to hear. that taught itself to ignore certain voices in certain zip codes written in a certain tone. Evelyn had been flagged not because she lied, but because she never escalated. She was polite, patient, civil. And in a country where outrage gets headlines, Evelyn whispered. The very next day, Officer Travis Boone was officially removed from active duty. The department released a 2-paragraph statement filled with the usual words, protocol breach, internal review, deepest condolences. Then came the apology. Boone stood in front of cameras, suit pressed, hands shaking slightly. "I made a terrible mistake," he said. "I believed what I was trained to see. I didn't stop to ask who she was, but the public didn't buy it. Not because he didn't mean it, maybe he did, but because the time to care had passed, and Evelyn was still dead." In the comments section of the live stream, one reply was pinned to the top. "You don't get to say sorry for a life you didn't bother to see." And somewhere far from the cameras, Malik was already gone. No interviews, no speeches, no medal ceremonies. He left the city the same way he came in, quietly, efficiently, without a trace. No one knew where he went. Some said he returned to D.C. Others whispered he was overseas again, buried under another alias. But he left behind one thing, a letter. Folded neatly, slipped into Jada's front mailbox, wrapped in an envelope with no return address. On the back, it just said, "To the only voice that never trembled." Inside, a note typed short. "Keep filming. Keep telling the truth." The world doesn't always listen to the loudest voice, but it does listen to the one that never quits. Truth doesn't always shout, Jada, but it always shines. Jada read it out loud on her live stream that night. She didn't cry. She just smiled softly and nodded. She wasn't famous, she said, staring into the camera, but she mattered. And so do you. Don't stop speaking even if they don't answer. That clip too went viral, but not because of hashtags. It spread because people felt something they hadn't in a long time. A quiet kind of justice, one that didn't end with noise, but with understanding. Over time, the story of Evelyn Rhodes wasn't remembered for the blood. It wasn't the shot. It wasn't the footage. It wasn't even the investigation. It was the silence after. The way a whole neighborhood froze. The way a son refused to speak on command. The way a child's voice carried the truth forward without rage but with clarity. And when the news finally moved on, when newer tragedies pushed this one off the scroll, Evelyn remained. Not as a headline, but as a question. A mirror. A challenge. And her story didn't fade. It was written into school essays, framed in community centers, used in law lectures on AI bias and system triage failures, taught in police academies under the heading, "What Silence Should Never Mean." Justice came, not with sirens, not with parades, but with a pause. And in that pause, something changed. It started as a rumor. A whisper passed between hands and hallways. Then one morning beneath the gray stone archway on 147th Street, it appeared. The Evelyn Rhodes Center for Civil Awareness. No marble, no fanfare, just brick sunlight and the steady footsteps of children pushing open the door. Inside, the walls were lined with letters, real ones, from people in the neighborhood who had once written into the void just like Evelyn. Now they were pinned, framed, taught. Third graders learned how to file a complaint. Middle schoolers discussed systemic bias in government forms. Teenagers debated what it meant when a system listens selectively. And on one of the whiteboards in the back room, scribbled in big black marker, it read, "You don't have to be loud. You have to be clear." Every Thursday, a class titled, "How One Letter Changed the Law," drew full seats. It didn't use Evelyn's face, but her words, they filled every inch of that room. Elsewhere, Riley stayed. Despite everything, she didn't transfer out of the Bronx. Instead, she went inward. With quiet persistence, she started the city's first internal citizen review unit. No badges, just neighbors. Trained, vetted, empowered to ask the hard questions when no one else would. She called the group the gray line, not black, not blue, just truth where the colors blur, and Jada. She didn't just grow, she rose. At 15, her channel launched a series called The Voices No One Heard Until They Changed Everything. First episode, Evelyn. Second, a janitor from Chicago who stopped a wrongful eviction. Third, a delivery driver in Houston who caught a hate crime on dashcam. But the fourth never aired. She said it wasn't ready, and maybe it never would be. Some stories she believed needed to live in silence a little longer. And Malik. He came back once. No one saw him arrive. No one took a photo. Early Sunday morning, he stepped through the cemetery gate, hands in his coat pockets. The air was sharp, but still. He walked alone, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound. At Evelyn's grave, he knelt, pulled a single white lily from his coat, laid it down carefully as if placing something fragile into the world. He didn't speak, didn't cry, just closed his eyes for a long moment, then rose, and walked away, leaving only the wind behind him. Etched into the headstone above her, just beneath her name, were the words, "You can't silence what echoes." And it was true, because long after the cameras stopped, long after the hashtags faded, long after the interviews ended, Evelyn still echoed. In school hallways, in precinct meeting rooms, in the voice of a girl who believed her neighborhood deserved the truth. She never wanted a legacy. She wanted fairness. She wanted to be heard. And in the end, she was. Not with applause, not with vengeance, but with a flame. One small enough to cup in your hands, yet strong enough to light every street they once tried to leave in the dark. Evelyn Rhodes didn't change the world. She reminded it to listen. Evelyn's story wasn't about noise. It was about presence, about standing your ground even when no one is looking. She didn't demand the spotlight, she became the light for others. This story reminds us justice isn't always loud, but it always matters. And sometimes the smallest voice becomes the one we remember forever. If this story touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Mac's Stories for more powerful, true-to-life narratives like this one. Your support helps us bring more stories that echo with meaning, justice, and human dignity. At Mr. Mac's Stories, we believe some echoes deserve to be heard forever. Be part of that echo right here with us.